la 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 la! Hello, collectors, and welcome to my review of the SH MonsterArts Gamera 1996. This is the first Gamera release in the SH MonsterArts line, and it is one that's been highly anticipated by fans of this line everywhere. With a high-profile release like this, it's guaranteed Bandai didn't screw this up. Right? Well, let's take a look and see whether or not it's worth adding into your collection. There aren't many words I can use to describe Gamera's looks, aside from stunning. The sculpted detail is wonderful, and every nook and cranny looks great. Parts on Gamera are nice and sharp, and it feels more valuable this way. The paint is nicely done, too, almost matching the prototype. However, you may encounter some small paint issues. First off, a look at the face where you can see the paint looks great. Looking in the mouth, though, you may notice some slop, which is disappointing, but it doesn't really kill the turtle. Moving down to the plastron, the grayish paint is nice, but some people have reported incomplete paint jobs, just like I have over here. You can see that some of the paint actually isn't even on this portion of the plastron anymore. It's just kind of chipping off, it looks like. And in addition to that, some have even reported what I have over here, which would be some clumpiness in the paint, which it's not that bad, but it's still something to make note of. And then opening it up, which I'll show you how to do later, you can see this yellow core here, which is a hard yellowish plastic, and it looks very nicely done. You just simply have to see it in hand to really appreciate the detail put in there. The arms look great, and the paints for the elbow blades and the claws are applied wonderfully, which is simply perfect. And remember before how I said there are sharp parts on Gamera? Well, aside from those tusks he has, yeah, don't hurt yourself on these blades. They're pretty sharp. The legs look great, and the nails on the feet are pretty awesome too. And finally, a nice look at the bluish-greenish shell of Gamera, where the sculpting detail is very impressive. I mean, just look at all of these small little bumps on the shell. You'll really appreciate it when you're handling Gamera. Like I said, he looks great, with only minor issues here and there, which may only bother perfectionists. Overall, though, I can forgive the issues because it's a stellar product, aside from those points. Gamera's articulation is pretty great. To be perfectly honest with you, for the design, it's astounding. However, there is one very, very important feature of it you must know about before you go handling Gamera. So to start with the articulation, we have Gamera's jaw, which I believe is on a ball joint, because you can wiggle it around like so, but effectively you're just going to get hinge motion out of it. It's going to open and close like so, and like some of the Godzillas released in the line, there is a hinge at the base of the tongue, which allows you to move the tongue ever so much like this. Yeah, pretty neat. Kind of useless, but it's pretty cool. And then moving down from there, we have the head, which is attached to the neck on a ball joint, and then there are two other ball joints in the neck itself, which then attach into the body on a ball joint. So this way you're going to be able to get Gamera to look left, right, up, and down with ease. It's so wonderful. Now, as you see me moving Gamera's head around like so on the neck, you'll notice that this upper part of the shell here likes to move around a little bit. And there may be a few reviewers out there who may or may not say, oh, this piece of the shell, it's attached on a ball joint, you got nothing to worry about, and you would think so, because it kind of moves around on a ball joint. No, it is not on any sort of real joint at all. I'm not going to disassemble it because it's a royal pain in the ass if I do it wrong. But there is this little peg, which is about right here, because this is soft plastic. And this peg is inserted in a hole to this top part of the shell of Gamera. And then this peg is inserted into the main shell of Gamera here up on the shoulders. Now here's the issue. It's not actually glued to the main shell of Gamera. So you have this little peg which is just sitting in this little slit on the shell here, holding this piece in place. So if you pop this off, you're going to have that little peg which is just going to float around. And because there's nothing holding it, it could drop and fall into the main body of Gamera. And then you have to take off the bottom part here, and you have to have that little peg fall through here, and then you have to work to get that little floating piece to put back into here, and then plug it back into the top part of the shell, and then that doesn't work, you got to heat it up some more, yada 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 yada. Long story short, whatever you do, do not pop this off. This is not meant to actually move around like a ball joint. This is just meant to free up Gamera's neck movement a teeny tiny bit, so this way it's not totally restricted. Anyway, moving down from there, we have Gamera's shoulder, which is a double ball jointed system, as you'll see in the accessory section of this video. So you're going to be able to get Gamera's arms to move around freely, which is absolutely wonderful. Then moving down from there, we have here at the bicep, which plugs into the elbow, a ball joint. And then there's a working hinge in there. And then from the elbow attaching to the forearm, we have another ball joint hinge combo. It's literally a ball joint which plugs into here and then a hinge in the elbow. And then moving down from there, we actually have another ball joint which plugs into here, this little piece of sculpt. And then we have the individual hands, as you can see here, the finger portion of the hands, which are plugged into this sculpt on a ball joint. So realistically speaking, if you want to get Gamera's arms in a specific position, there's nothing to hold you back aside from your own creativity. Moving on down for the articulation, Gamera's plastron opens up, and you can expose the core for his Mana Death Beam Ray, whatever you prefer to call it, because the fandom can't really decide on one thing, even though it explicitly states one thing in the source material or whatever. Anyway, so here's how you open it up. It's a little tricky because it's a system of hinges and ball joints, and if you force one in the wrong direction, you may unfortunately break it, or you may pop one of the parts off, and it's a pain in the ass to get back on, yada yada yada. You know where I'm going with this. Just be careful with it. So the way that I like to think of it is you have two separate parts to this mechanism here. You have the outer lining, and then you have the inner. So the way that you should go about opening this up is first move the outer parts here. These parts are on ball joints, which are attached to the body on hinges, as you can sort of see there. There's a ball joint in there, and there's a ball joint in there, and then it moves on a hinge. So do this carefully, because you may force it in a direction and snap a part off, just like so. And when I say snap a part off, I don't necessarily mean pop a part off, as you can see down here. So this way you can see in there, see his little beater. But anyway, if that happens, you can just pop the ball joint back on. So just be careful not to ham hand it and just actually snap one of the hinges. You don't want to do that. So okay, now that you have the outer rim opened up, you can move the inner rim. And then these are just on hinges. So all I got to do is just push that up, push these out to the side. Now at these you need to be careful because they like to collide in with the two down here. And then for the bottom one, you just flip it down. And boom, now you're ready to display Gamera taking out Legion. Closing it back up, it's the reverse process. All you got to do is just close the inner rim. Be careful to avoid the bigger parts which you opened up first. It's like so. Close them back up. Some people like to align everything up properly, some don't. It's up to the user. And there you go. As you can see, it's all closed up. And it's not perfect, but again, if you want to, you can really fiddle with it and twist the ball joints around, so this way you can get it to line up perfectly. Moving on from there, we have Gamera's hips, which are on ball joints, as you can see here. Move them around. Oh, that's something else, as you'll see in the accessory section. As you move the hips around, there may be a chance that the lower portion of Gamera's body may pop off, which it's not really that big of a deal, aside from it just, happening. So, yeah, anyway, hips are on ball joints, as you can see, so you can really move Gamera's legs around. The knees are on the same style joint that the elbows have, the ball joint hinge combo. And then you move down here to the ankles, which are ball joints. So you can really get Gamera's legs to move very, very wonderfully. From there, the last bit of articulation Gamera would have is we have a ball joint right here at the base of the tail, and then we have another ball joint here, 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 and here, which allow for some sweet movement, quite possibly one of the best articulated tails in the SH MonsterArts line. You're going to be able to get Gamera's tail to move around in any sort of pose you want. But again, just note that if you do push this up too high, well, you might accidentally pop off Gamera's bottom half again, which really is not that big of a deal because you can just pop it right back on. So when it's all said and done for the articulation, there are only two issues. This little connector piece which holds this top part of the shell on, and the fact that his lower portion of his body likes to pop off when you move around, the legs or the tail. Aside from those two issues, Gamera's articulation is practically perfect, and you really couldn't ask for much more. Looking at the accessories, we get the essentials. First, for Gamera's accessories, we get this fireball effect part. As you can see here, it's a nice fireball with a trail coming out of Gamera's mouth. Very nice. And it is a nice translucent orange-red. sort of like the Tamashii Effect Burning Flame Red version, which is very nicely done. It really does look nice in hand, which is always a plus. And then for that Fireball Effect part, we get this Blast Effect base, which if you have any of the Godzilla beams, chances are you already have one of these, except it's in a more orangish, reddish, translucent plastic, which, yeah, nothing new and original there. And then you get this support pole instead of a typical Tamashii Stage Act support arm. And setting up the Fireball Effect, it's pretty easy to do, but I don't know, it can be a little bit difficult lining up Gamera's mouth with this pole. But anyway, you get a little nub here on the end of the pole you just plug into the trail, and then you plug the other end into the base, like so. And now we have the fireball in midair. And then you just take your giant turtle and line it up like so. And now Gamera is firing a fireball. As a side note, though, let's say you wanted to get a little bit more creative with Gamera's pose and how he's shooting the fireball. And if you wanted to do that, you can use your typical Tamashii Stage Act support arm for the fireball effect instead of that stupid pull you get. Up next for the accessories, you get two extended arm parts for Gamera, or as I like to call them because that's what they look like, wings. And then you also get an alternate lower half for Gamera, which is used for when he goes into flight mode. And swapping out these parts, it's easy to do, but you just gotta be careful when you're doing it. And the reason why I say you have to be careful is that you're moving some joints, which you need to be relatively, well, careful with. So for the arm parts, what you basically just have to do is grab Gamera's arms at the bicep and pull and pop them out. So you have to be careful because you're dealing with the plastron here. And you can see the ball joint configuration there. And then all you have to do is just take the right arm part. Well, I mean, it's his left, but you know what I mean. And just pop it on, like so. So now we have properly swapped out arms for Gamera. And now the lower portion. Like I said, and I've shown you before, it's easy to pop off. And then you take your option part and just line it up. Be careful of all of the hinges and whatnot. Just line it up nice and easy like that. And there you go. Now you've got a flying turtle. But here's the issue. Yeah, oops, that popped off. Gamera isn't able to actually fly. So how do we fix this? With what is quite possibly the dumbest support stand for a flying action figure ever. So this is the actual support piece and what you do. I mean, in theory, it makes sense, but in practicality, it's pretty dumb. You can see how big it is. Anyway, it's molded to line up with the option part for Gamera. So you just line it up like that. And because they wanted to be economically sound, you take the fiery explosion base. Yeah, you can tell how enthusiastic I am here, and you just pop it in. And now your Gamera can hover about in what is that? Maybe two inches off the ground. Yeah. Yay! But on the bright side, at least you get something. Looking at everything, we get the essentials. Option parts for flying and an effect part. But the support for both of them is, well, crap. A better stand for both the flying parts and the fireball effect would be nice, and a mana beam would be nice too. But the bottom line is he's packed with accessories, and this small return to this format is most appreciated. And now the part of the review I'm sure many of you have been waiting for, the size comparison. And I gotta say, Gamera looks awesome. First up, here's a size comparison with some Ultra Act figures. First we have the Ultras, and then we have the Kaiju. And then moving on from there, we have NECA's Pacific Rim figures, specifically Cherno Alpha and Battle Damage Knifehead. And now onto the MonsterArts line, where we have the Batra Larva to the left, and the Gigan 2004 to the right, followed by Biolante on the left, and Destroya Final Form on the right. Moving on from there, going into the Kyoto's Sci-Fi Revel Tech line, we have the Super Gyaos on the left, and the Mother Legion on the right, and as you can see, Gamera is very large for these two, though you could make Super Gyaos work just right. And now here's a size comparison I know a lot of you have been waiting for. We have the G2 Gamera Revel Tech on the left, and the G1 Gamera Revel Tech on the right, and as you can see, there's absolutely no question about the size of the MonsterArts Gamera. It completely dwarfs the Revel Tech Gameras. So you know what this means. We finally have a Gamera which is in scale with the SH MonsterArts Godzilla. Yes. So as you can see, if you have an idea of how big Gamera is, chances are he may just be a little bit bigger than you initially anticipated. Actually a little bit smaller for me, but I digress. This Gamera should look perfect with your 6-inch scale display. So, buy it now, skip it, or wait for a deal. Looks-wise, you're getting a great figure. Minor issues with the paint, but the detailing on this turtle is awesome, and much better than some of the other releases in the line. Articulation for the design is damn near perfect, with the only issues being the little peg holding the top part of the shell on causing issues if removed, and the legs and tail help in popping off the lower part of the body easily if you extend it beyond the normal range of movement. Accessories? Great, but the execution could be a little bit better. Overall, Gamera is an awesome figure, and those who waited on the Reveltech Gameras to get this one made the right choice, because this is probably the best Gamera action figure available. Starting with Godzilla, adding in Kong, and now with the Gamera releases, I personally hope Bandai is willing to dive into this property more and give other monsters the proper treatment they deserve.